Welcome back to the How to Read Your Birth Chart series. This series is especially dedicated to those of you who have my complete chart assessment report. I want these videos to help people get all the information that you can get out of that complete chart assessment report. So at the beginning of the series, I talked about how important it is to set the context for the specifics that you're going to interpret from the planets. Before interpreting specific details, get your bearings about the situation. Know the context. Then the initial context is set by looking at the nakshatra of the ascendant and the moon and considering how they're resonant or dissonant with each other. And then add to that the Rashi and Navamsha of the ascendant and consider how those are resonant or dissonant with each other and how they resonate or dissonate with the nakshatras. That gives you a very good, detailed, rich background context for what the chart is all about before you dive into specific details. In addition to that, the yogas of classical Indian astrology are extremely useful. They look at many principles at once. In fact, that's what the word yoga implies. The word yoga implies linking things together. In my complete chart assessment, I'm going to evaluate about 50 yogas that I consider to be super, extremely, absolutely essential for reading a chart. And about half of those 50 are contextual yogas, so those come at the beginning of the report. This time around, we're just going to look at Trump because it takes a long time to go through all this information. Some of these yogas are things that I've showed you already. In this series, we already talked about how to calculate and interpret the balance of nakshatra types. And it's based on these others, like calculation of the Rashi element balance, which we've also gone over already in the previous videos, and the calculation of the Rashi modes. Then there's another group of yogas called Sankhya yogas, where you count the number of signs that are occupied in total by the planets, excluding Rahu and Ketu. So you can have up to 7 signs. We find that Trump has 5, and so he has something called a harsh yoga. What doesn't mean harsh, like the English word harsh, although the English word harsh means that it will hurt you because it's bristly, and it is cognate with the Sanskrit word harsha, because with harsha you become bristly, your hair stand on, and you come to attention, you stand up, you get excited. These yogas, these Sankhya yogas, they show you what the person looks at life as, what's their basic attitude towards life. So in Trump's case, it's an enjoyer yoga. This yoga can produce anything from artists to hedonists, depending on the rest of the context. Trump's context is a Leo ascendant with Mars right on it, a Magha nakshatra ascending with a Jyeshta moon. So it's not really going to produce an artist so much as it's going to produce a hedonist. Then there's this general scope yoga, which is about how the sun is configured relative to the moon in the 3 types of squares. The cardinal squares, the Panapara squares, or the Apaklama squares. He's got a configuration that just says, give a negative slant, a little bit more negative slant to the rest of the specific interpretations that you do. So a lot of times these contextual yogas don't really say anything in and of themselves, but they help you figure out how to interpret the rest of the chart, and this is an example of that. He's also got something called Hana Yoga, which in this case doesn't mean wealth, actually, but it means that the ability to grow from things and therefore develop success. So he's got one out of 3 counts of prosperity yoga. You'll find that most successful or famous people do have some version of this yoga. One either to the 1st degree, 2nd degree, or 3rd degree. But look at this one. This is the first really significant yoga that you find in Trump's chart, the Maha Vaakya. Well, Maha Vaakya means very great fortune. And this is determined by analyzing the gender dynamics in the chart. So for example, Trump is a man, and he's born during the daytime. That's a synergy. Daytime is male. Then his rising sign is Leo, that's also male, very male. His moon sign is Sagittarius, that's also male. And his sun sign is Gemini, that's also male. So he's got all of those factors, all synergistic on the male side. So that's going to give a lot of good fortune because you have a lot of power. Everything's flowing in the same direction, and it's going to give a lot of, with the male yoga. It's going to give especially a lot of power, strength. And as a result of that power and strength, you become more successful. So you see, this is particularly prominent in Trump's chart because he's got Mars right on his ascendant. So masculinity is a huge factor for him. So the fact that he's got a Maha Vaakya male yoga with that Mars right on the ascendant really resonates and drives the effects of this Maha Vaakya yoga, makes them much more prominent than it would in a chart that doesn't have Mars in such a prominent position. Another significant yoga for Trump is Shubha Shubha, gentle or strong. And this is because of the Mars alone in his first house. Okay, this will happen if you have only malefics in the first, or only malefics in the second and 12th. Then you'll get this Ashubh yoga, which is what he has. Or if you do it vice versa, only a benefic in the first, or only a benefic in the 12th and 2nd, then you get a Shubha yoga. He's got the yoga formed by malefic, by Mars. So he's very strong, unforgiving, strong, tough. And that gives him strength. It's a yoga that will give you something good. The planet's by itself, so it's got room to operate. So it's not that the Ashubha yoga brings bad results. It brings good results as a malefic, which means giving you toughness and strength and power, but bad results for gentle things. So the Ashubha yoga is part of the reason why Trump is very, very like a bull in a china shop. Whenever the situation requires sensitivity, gracefulness, tact, gentility. Another very, very important yoga, which comes up in Trump's chart, is called Madruga. It's going to happen because he has no neighbors to his moon. There's no planet in the 12th from the moon. There's no planet in the 2nd from the moon. That's the first degree of the yoga. He has it to the 2nd degree also. 2nd degree means stronger in strength because his moon is not in a Kendra, not in houses 1, 4, 7, or 10. And the yoga can be to the 3rd degree, which he also has because he doesn't have one of the 5 real planets in the Kendra to the moon. So he's got a full-fledged form of the Madruga yoga. The key thing about this Madruga yoga, it affects your mind, of course, because it's based on the moon. And what the Madruga yoga really does is make you detached from the world, feeling as if you cannot integrate with the world. The world is over here and I'm over here, and we're on different pages. So this is the thing with Trump, is he's extremely disconnected from reality. He's living in his own reality. But because he's got Maha Vaakya yoga very strongly, and he's got a strong Mars in his first house in Leo, he's successful anyway. It's not like he's detached from the world and can't integrate with it and just isolated in a corner. But he's not really quite on the same page with the rest of reality. Now, the Madruga yoga is based on the neighbors of the moon. Neighbors of the sun are also somewhat important, less than the moon, because the moon is the mind and feminine in nature, so it's more sensitive to its surroundings. The sun is masculine in nature, so it's less sensitive to those surroundings. With the sun, you'll very frequently have Mercury and Venus in its neighboring houses, 2 and 12. So you can kind of disregard those. You don't pay too much attention to those. But if you have a planet besides Mercury and Venus in the 12th or 2nd house from the sun, then it will tell you something significant. So Trump's got Saturn in the sun's 2nd house. Sun's 2nd house means how the career or identity expresses itself into the world. If it's the 12th house, it's about how the sun would take in the world. The 2nd house is how the sun exports to the world. So he's expressing through Saturn. His career and ambitions and all those sense of ego is coming out into the world through Saturn. Actually, what Saravali says about this is adulterously wealthy, wicked, contemptuous, fraudulent, and aged. So adulterously wealthy means you're making profits, because Saturn's poor, but when you're poor, you know how to get money from other people. You may become a very good thief. So that's what Saturn has, an ability to use other people's resources to profit yourself. That's what adulterously wealthy means. and wicked and contemptuous, expressing oneself critically when Saturn is in the second position from the moon or the sun will be critical expressions. He's going to point out flaws in other people but not see the flaws in himself because of having Saturn in this position. Or this is what's indicated as the background tendency. You look for other things, specific things in the chart that back this up, that show this. Remember, in Trump's case, he's got this Jeshta moon with Ketu. So he's really in the political mood. He's criticizing others to make his politics. Now, with Donald Trump, we're talking about the most unlikely person in the world to become the most powerful person in the world. So he's got a Raja Yoga, and you better bet that this Raja Yoga should show up as being strong. And this is a good way to test your system, is to evaluate whether or not his Raja Yoga shows up as being strong. Now, don't forget, he has other yogas like this big, very, very prominent Ashubh Yoga, giving the strength of Mars. Why is that Ashubh Yoga so strong? Because Mars is exactly on the ascendant. It's like 3 degrees away from the ascendant. Now, this Raja Yoga is because Ketu is in the 5th house. If Rahu and Ketu are in the 5th or the 9th or the 1st, they can form a Raja Yoga if they connect with the Lord of a Kendra. And vice versa, if they're in the Kendras, 1st, 4th, 7th, or 10th house, they can form Raja Yoga if they connect with lords of a Kona, 1, 5, or 9. So here we have Ketu in the 5th. So there he is. He's sitting in a Kona. If he connects with the Lord of a Kendra, he's got it. So he's with the moon, but the moon is Trump's 12th lord. But he's exactly aspected by the sun. The sun is his first lord. So this is making Raja Yoga. How will you see how powerful the Raja Yoga is? First of all, look at the moon's chart. From the moon's chart, Ketu is now in the 1st house, which is both a Kendra and a Kona. The sun then is the 9th lord. So that's also a Raja Yoga from the moon's chart. That's a very important way to check and see how strong the Raja Yoga is. If it's not just a Raja Yoga from the ascendant, but also a Raja Yoga from the moon, it's powerful. The other thing to do is simply look at the potency of the planets causing the yoga. Trump's yoga formed by the sun is the most powerful planet in his chart. And Ketu is also very powerful. So this Raja Yoga is super strong. Okay, so this would give you the background information about Trump. That, okay, this guy is a tough cookie. For sure he's a tough cookie. He's got Leo rising with the Sagittarius Navamsha. Well, he's got some smarts to him. He knows what he's doing. He's a tough cookie, though, because he's got that Ashubh Yoga. That's the first really strong yoga that we saw. And he's a lucky guy because he's got Maha Vaakya Yoga, but lucky in a male way. So he's got a lot of power and maleness to him. With that Ashubh Yoga is definitely reinforcing that because it's a male yoga. He's got Mars right there in his ascendant all by itself. So here's a real tough man who's lucky, but detached from the world, like not on the same page as the world, and is going to go through dramatic ups and downs because of the Madruga Yoga, and has a Saturnian way of expressing himself. Not at all gentle. It's all masculine. And is going to become powerful because of this Raja Yoga. Now that becomes the background for your chart. And that's going to inform the way that you interpret the various planets and the various signs in the various houses. So that's why in my complete chart assessment, after I give you the yogas that are applicable to your chart, then I'm going to just calculate the potencies and then go into the specifics about planets and signs and houses. So stick with us. In the next how-to video, I'm going to talk about how you can calculate the prominence of the planets. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of this cool stuff and all the other cool video series that I'm doing. Thank you so much. Haribol.